Usually at the end of each year, I release a couple of videos going over all the best cards in every respective segment, their grades, as well as the general best cards and worst cards released, including the best and worst things that happened in Vanguard in general. However, this year I haven't done that because I was a lot busier with a lot of extra things in my personal life and a lot of other content that was happening, so I didn't have time to make those videos. But we're doing it a little bit different this year. As of a recommendation of Different Fight, we're going to talk about my personal top 5 cards that carried me through 2021. Without any further ado, these are my most instrumental cards of the last year. Stand up! Vanguard! Hey Cardfighters, welcome back to another video, and today we're gonna have a more hard-lighted discussion. We're gonna sit back and just relax and talk about some Vanguard cards. Now, as I already explained a little bit in the intro, this video idea mainly comes from Different Fight, but other creators also have been joining in, like Outer Orange and anybody that's been on Twitter, been posting their own personal list. And basically what Different Fight does every year is reflect back to the past year of Vanguard and see which cards were the most instrumental card for him personally, which carried him through the year, so aka the cards he relied on the most. And I thought, why not do that for myself, do a little bit of a twist on it. Probably you're going to assume my entire list is going to be filled with Gear Chronicle cards, but that said, I could easily have done that, but I wanted to make at least a bit more variety in the list, so I limit myself to only one card per clan or per nation if we're going to talk about standard or overdress. Now I need to give a disclaimer. I said it in the past couple of videos, I haven't really been playing a lot of Vanguard in 2021. Now, a lot of that has to do with the virus, with the pandemic, but also with the fact that my country has been going in and out of multiple lockdowns. So local game stores weren't able to play, you weren't able to play locals, and I also don't have a locals nearby, and regionals weren't a thing. So there wasn't really a lot of incentives to play, and at the beginning of the year, the first half of the year, I wasn't all too keen on remote fights, so that's all the reason why I didn't participate in BSFRO, I believe it's called, Bushiroad Springfest Online, but I did participate in BRO, and sadly only for one regional or one format because of work reasons. So that means selecting 5 cards has been more tougher than I initially thought, because it all came down to one specific nation and one clan, because those have been the clans and nations I've been playing constantly over and over again while I was playing. But that said, there are other specific cards that had some impact in some capacity, in some way, that dictated other choices that I made, and to some extent also led me to my new favorite decks in either Standard or V Premium. And you might notice that I didn't mention Premium here. That's because I hardly played any Premium, if at all. Maybe I think I played like max 5 Premium games in 2021. But that said, I hope to change that moving forward in 2022, because there's a lot of spicy things on the horizon, including the new Premium Collection set. But also Chronos Command and the new Steam Maidens and whatnot. There's a lot of interesting and spicy stuff to be played against. So I am looking forward to the future. But before we're gonna dive into the future, let's first reflect to the past, because you're here for the top 5, so let's dive into the top 5. So we're gonna start off the list with a brand new card, and this card should actually be a lot higher, but I placed on number 5 because it's a brand new card. And this card, anybody that knows me knows that once I start talking about Gear Chronicle, I find an excuse to bring this card up. And that card is none other than Steam Knight Caliburn. The golden boy, my homeboy, the brand new introduction and brand new inclusion of the latest V-Clan collection set. This card, in my opinion, has been instrumental to the clan. It's such a versatile card, and I can literally just talk about hours and hours and hours about this card, why it's amazing, why it's so good, and every time you will see me in a video discussing the newest decks and the latest iteration for Gear Chronicle support or whatever, you will find me finding an excuse to bring up this card. And there will be a new collab video on the Meta Nerds channel about the new Steam Maiden cards, and yes, you guessed it, I brought this card up every time I could, because That's how much I am obsessed with this card, and this card will only become better and better in the future, and it's one of the reasons why I'm only become more and more excited and happy to play Gear Chronicle, as this card opens up so many interesting possibilities. And if I have an excuse to add this card to my deck list, you bet your ass I will take that opportunity. So that's why Caliburn is definitely on number 5, but only because it's a brand new card and it's just entered the fray in this competition. But I wouldn't be surprised if this card ranked up like maybe number 2 or maybe number 1 following next year, or should I say this year. Just keep an eye open for that. Now, if we move up to number 4, we've got a card that I'm personally very, very surprised on that it's here. Or should I say more what it represents. Because I would have never in my life guessed that I would be excited for a Spike Brothers card. Like, it's one of the nations I couldn't have cared less about. Like, I know there are some players out there that are really obsessed with the clan like I am with Gear Chronicle, and I am all for that. But I personally am not that type of person. Yet, for number 4, I have Diabolos Violence Bruce. I don't know how this happened, but I have been fan of this deck and this playstyle ever since it was released and the skills were already revealed. Like, it was the starter deck that I went for right in the gate. And some might assume, aren't you a Nirvana guy? Aren't you an Arcs player or a Verena player? Yes, I am now, but I wasn't that on day 1 immediately. And it has to do with the playstyle of Bruce. Like, I think the reason why I'm so obsessed with the deck, especially in set 1, because I haven't really played Bruce beyond set 1. I have the stuff for set 2, but I haven't touched it because of something that we're going to talk about if we move forward in this list. But set 1 Bruce was such a blast to play, and it has probably to do with the fact that it feels more like a Pale Moon deck, as it works with the soul. You can superior call stuff and do all kind of shenanigans things, and of course with set 2 it introduced even more options. But honestly, that whole playstyle and that whole combo aspect of it is something that I really enjoyed and probably will still enjoy. Even if I'm playing Bruce right now, I probably will still have the same blast that I had with set 1. Only now, of course, the deck would be a lot powerful than it was in set 1. Now, moving forward to set 3, talking about Pale Moon, we've got Nightmare Duel Carol. Now, this could also be Chelsea, the new grade 3 support card for Nightmare Duels, and this is probably one of the reasons why it still is relevant in 2021, as seen as the Carol deck is relatively old, as I believe it came out in 2019, VBT 05, I think that was 2019, but it could have been, no, it's 2019 because it was before the G era was introduced in the V series, and I enjoyed that deck the moment it was an actual budget deck. And I learned later that there's actually quite a few people that picked up the deck because of my budget deck at the time. I believe, if I remember this correctly, Outer Orange is one of those people that picked up the deck after watching that video itself, or maybe she was interested but then made the step after watching that video. But I'm digressing here. I've enjoyed the deck ever since it was released, and Chelsea introduced so much more options for the deck and made the deck even more viable. I wouldn't say meta relevant, but it could be like a underdog pick because the deck has a lot of explosivity to it and can definitely catch people off guard and by surprise if they don't respect the potential explosiveness of the deck. And it was one of the decks that I was thinking about taking to BRO, but in the end decided against it because I didn't have enough practice with the deck at the time that I had earlier this year. Because I played this deck a lot at the beginning of 2021, right at the gate when V-Clan Collection was released, because the whole update to the deck gave me more reason to play it, and it really cemented why I enjoyed the deck and why I enjoy Pale Moon in general, because of the whole soul mechanic and the whole superior call engine and what it is. And I hope we might see more support in the future. I would be very surprised if they get more support, but if they would get some more support, I would definitely not be against it. Now for number 2, this probably wouldn't be a surprise, and this was the reason why I didn't really play Bruce much after set 1. I became an official Nirvana main, and I've been playing Nirvana non-stop in standard. Every time I play standard, my first pick is always going to the Nirvana overdress deck, because I've been so obsessed with the archetype and with the playstyle of the deck. Some players might find it very boring or not very fun to play and very one-dimensional, whereas I don't really see that. I personally see it like a very interesting deck with a lot of very specific small choices you need to make, which really reminds me of Gear Chronicle, especially Premium Gear Chronicle, with all the decisions that you have to make with which cards you need to discard and which not, and in Nirvana's case, it's all about which type of units you need to call to the board to make the right numbers you need, or when do you need to overdress, and which units you need to overdress, and how far do you need to commit into like a Valiente, for example. But the thing is, Nirvana isn't on my number 2 itself, and no, it's also not Trickstar. The card that I have for number 2 specifically is, of course, Arcs. Arcs is absolutely, has to be number 2. It could have been number 1, but there's an obvious choice on number 1 that has to be on number 1. But if that card wasn't a number 1 option, Arc would have been number 1 for sure. There is a reason why the term patented turn 2 play exists. That thing is me, and I am that thing. Like, Arcs and me go hand in hand, and there's so many memes came out of it, and so many awesome actions and plays. Like, we had the whole Twitch collaboration with Cardfighter, where basically the patented turn to play was born, but then also it was cemented, or basically set in stone, once we had the Cardfight Con Invitational Tournament, where I basically just went the patented turn 2 play all the way, and eventually won the entire tournament. And that whole tournament basically put in stone, cemented it down completely that I am Nirvana main, and that's why Arcs has to be number 2. And with that said, I am very, very excited about the new Nirvana Grade 4, as well as Asperari Dea. I am so ready for that new support. But that brings us to our number 1 card that I relied on the most in 2021. And you guessed it, it's very obvious which is on number 1. I haven't seen it so far in the list. So, of course, on number 1, we've got all the overtriggers that gave me games that I shouldn't have won, but because of it, I finally won those games. Oh, and also including all the 6 damage shield that made me not lose the games that I should have won, and then made me win the game. No, of course, it's Chronojet. Like, obviously it's Chronojet. Every time that I've had a chance to play Gear Chronicle, or there was some tournament that I would participate in, Gear Chronicle has always been the very first pick in my mind. Like, it's been the go-to deck, it's always the deck that I enjoyed the most, and Chronojet has also always been the main archetype within Gear Chronicle that I always find enjoyable to play the game. And there's never been a moment in the game where I feel like, nah, I don't feel like playing this deck right now, I'm getting bored of it. It just never happens. It just always keeps fun for me to play the deck over and over and over again. And in 2021, and to some extent at the end of 2022, we got more and more dedicated support. We got Time Leaper Dragon that was released in the V-Clan collection set that just happened at the beginning of last year, and then right at the end we got Caliburn with Chronos Command, which were more interesting options for the deck, and the deck just evolved and evolved and evolved into more options and more playability and more different directions you could take the deck. And I've been voicing this on Twitter every single time that I see other lists by other competent Gear Chronicle players, where you just see so many different options and variety in tech choices, in ratios and other stuff, where you never see an optimal complete deck for Gear Chronicle or for Chronojet, as there is not one optimal deck. There are many different versions of the deck you can play, which also means that even if you get bored of one particular variant, you can just move on to another and have as much as success and probably as much as fun, and potentially even more if you find out that that variant is more suited to your personal playstyle. And that's the reason why I enjoyed Gear Chronicle and mainly Chronojet as much as it is. And this is probably one of the main reasons why I keep enjoying Vanguard as much as I do. Because even in the face of the still format, the still meta of V Premium, with Prisms being a thing for over a year now, I don't really get all much annoyed about it or bothered by it, because I can just play Chronojet and just have my fun, even in tournament, facing off against it. And hey, if I need to smack more Prism players, I will just build another 101k Chronojet with a guard restrict and just smack face once again with a critical on a dry check. I've done it once, and you bet your ass I'm gonna do it again. And that's basically the 5 main cards I've been relying on in 2021. Now, as I said at the beginning of the video, I haven't really played a lot of Vanguard this year, but there are definitely a lot more cards that I could have included on this list. Like, of course, a buttload of different Great Chronicle cards could have been introduced. Like, Time Leaper Dragon was very instrumental this year. Chronos Command to some extent. But at the same time, I could also pick up other cards, like the Aggravane deck is also something I enjoyed a lot, because I like my wacky, weird ass, whatchamacallit, there's a specific word for it. I would say janky decks, although Aggravate isn't really jank, but some players might see it as jank. I like those weird decks that people don't really give the light of day, but it's still somewhat competent. And that's the reason why I personally like V-Clan Collection as much as I do. I know a lot of players haven't really enjoyed most of the reveals, but the decks themselves look really fun and are really fun to play. And those are the main reasons why I keep invested in Vanguard in general, even though I cannot play all too much. Because there's always something fun and new and excited to discover, even though the amount of options to actually play the game is very limited. But luckily, with BRO now being a thing and online play being more accessible, that hopefully will change in 2022. Of course, Springfest is also going to be a thing, but we have to wait and see how that is going to pan out because of the current world situation. But let's hope 2022 is going to be a much better 2021. But with that said, that's about everything that I got today. Let me know in the comments down below your personal top 5 cards you relied on in 2021, or your personal best cards in 2021. If you're not already, share it on Twitter, but you can also just add it here beneath the comments again. I'm also always curious to see your personal cards and your stories behind your cards. It's always interesting and touching to read everybody's personal stories of why they enjoy specific cards, or what those cards mean to them, and why it basically keeps them playing and invested in the game that is Cardfight Vanguard. But with that said, I want to give a huge shout out to my Patreon supporters over at patreon.com/VanguardInsider. You guys are amazing. If you do want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, you can simply go to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a patron today. But with that said, I've been Mr. Time Leap, and I see you guys in the next one!